Today we're forcing it in interference fit, baby. Snug as fuck. We are mechanical engineering made simple.
That is certainly one way to kick things off, but honestly, I mean, given the sheer scale and density of the stack of documents we're looking at today, it might be the most accurate description of what we actually have to do.
Right. Because I want you to imagine, just for a second, waking up tomorrow morning in a completely different world. Like a world where the air around you is literally humming with this invisible, limitless energy that just charges your devices without a single wire.
Sounds pretty nice so far.
Oh, it gets wilder. You look up at the sky, and silently gliding through the upper atmosphere are these massive space stations that require absolutely zero rocket fuel to move.
Okay, defying physics now, I like it.
Exactly. And you go about your day with perfect enhanced vision, your actual biological code gently tweaked to thrive in this new environment. And the entire time, there is an omnipresent, hyper-intelligent system quietly monitoring your brainwaves, literally predicting your mental health before you even feel a spike of anxiety.
I mean, it sounds like the plot of a deeply dystopian sci-fi novel.
It really does. But the thing is, we aren't reading a sci-fi novel today. We are looking at a stack of 6 very real, highly complex, and wildly dense technical patents.
Yeah, and spread them out on a table, and they seem like they belong to entirely different fields. You've got quantum computing, human gene editing, advanced optical lenses, terahertz energy harvesting, AI, psychiatry, and even propellantless space drives.
They span multiple disciplines of extreme cutting-edge science. We're talking about theoretical physics, advanced materials engineering, molecular biology, neural networks, all of it.
Right.
But today, we're going to force them together. We're going to look at these 6 patents through a very specific, slightly terrifying, but mostly fascinating lens.
I can see where this is going.
What if a single shadow entity,
Yep.
let's just call them the company, were systematically combining all of these specific patents to build that exact futuristic, sprawling empire I just described?
Wow.
I am going to play the enthusiastic conspiracy theorist, connecting the dots of this grand design.
Yeah.
And you, my friend, are going to be the calm, meticulous skeptic.
I will gladly accept that role. Because my goal here won't be to shut down the wonder of your grand unified theory. My job is to take a magnifying glass to the hard science, the mechanical feasibility, and the actual physics described in each of these documents.
Keep me grounded.
Exactly. We are going to look strictly at the facts within these sources to see if this hypothetical supersystem could actually work in the real world. We will explain the how and the why behind every single mechanism.
And that is our mission statement for this deep dive. To draw you, the listener, into the sheer wonder of what is technologically being patented right now, reporting strictly on the facts and exploring the mechanical reality of this hypothetical empire.
So where do we start?
Well, if a shadow company is building a global, omnipresent, futuristic system, the very first thing they're going to need is an unfathomable amount of processing power.
Right, a brain.
Yes, a master computing engine that can handle the logistics of an entire global empire. And that brings us to our first patent, the superconducting complex quantum computing circuit.
Ah, yes. Patent US 1175829B2. This is a genuinely brilliant document because it addresses one of the absolute hardest physical roadblocks in quantum computing today.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, when we talk about classical computing, like the device you are likely listening to this on, everything operates on bits, ones and zeros, on or off.
Right.
But in quantum computing, we deal with qubits.
And a qubit doesn't just hold a 1 or a 0, right? It exists in like a superposition of states. It can be both at the same time until you actually measure it.
Precisely. But because they exist in that incredibly delicate quantum state, they are extremely sensitive to their environment. They are prone to a phenomenon called crosstalk.
Crosstalk.
Yeah, this is when unwanted electromagnetic interactions occur between adjacent qubits.
Okay, so imagine you were trying to have a deeply serious whispered conversation at a massive, echoing, noisy house party.
That's a good way to look at it.
Right, so if there are 100 other people shouting around you, their voices bleed into your space, the sound waves bounce off the walls, and suddenly you can't even hear the person standing 2 inches in front of you.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, actually. In a physical quantum circuit, if you place multiple qubits close to each other on a silicon or sapphire substrate, the electromagnetic signals you use to control one qubit can ripple out.
And they bleed over.
Exactly. They alter the delicate quantum state of the neighboring qubit, and the moment that happens, your computation is completely ruined. The entire point of this patent is designing a physical architecture to suppress that specific interaction.
Okay, so how does our shadow company build a master brain that doesn't, you know, talk over itself at the party?
It fundamentally reimagines the circuit substrate itself. The patent describes a wiring pattern that includes the quantum bit and a measurement electrode. But the critical innovation here is the grounding.
Grounding.
Yeah, they use ground patterns at ground potential, and they drill down. They implement something called a through substrate electrode.
Wait, they are physically boring a hole right through the center of the chip to connect the grounds.
Wow.
Why does that matter? Does that act like hanging soundproof foam on the walls of our noisy party?
Essentially, yes, but with electromagnetic waves instead of acoustic waves. A typical substrate is like a flat plane. When an electromagnetic wave is generated, it travels across the surface and through the material.
Makes sense.
But by physically drilling a hole through the inside of the substrate and filling it with a conductive material, you connect the ground pattern on the top surface directly to the ground pattern on the bottom surface.
How does that do?
This through electrode actively suppresses the generation of unnecessary electromagnetic modes inside the material. It mathematically changes the resonant frequency of the space, completely stopping the wave from propagating over a wide area.
Oh, wow. It's like dropping a massive pillar in the middle of a wave pool to break up the water before it reaches the other side.
That is exactly it. But the physical structure of the qubit itself is where the mechanics get truly elegant. The patent specifies that the quantum bit includes a first electrode, an inner disk that has a first capacitance with a ground portion.
Okay, I need to visualize this. An inner disk, so just a microscopic metal circle.
Correct. And that inner disk is surrounded by a second electrode, which is shaped like an outer ring. This outer ring has a second capacitance that is strictly larger than the first.
Let's unpack capacitance for a second. That's just a material's ability to store an electrical charge, right? Like bucket holding water. So the outer ring is just a bigger bucket.
Yes, essentially. But in this context, it's about how the electric field interacts between these shapes. By having a smaller inner disk and a larger outer ring, they are engineering the electric field lines to be tightly confined.
Okay.
But the real magic happens where these two pieces, the disk and the ring, connect. They are joined by a Josephson junction.
A Josephson junction. I hear that term thrown around in quantum physics all the time, but what is it actually doing mechanically?
So a Josephson junction is the beating heart of superconducting quantum computing. Imagine two superconducting materials, metals that have zero electrical resistance when cooled to absolute zero.
Right.
Now, sandwich a molecularly thin layer of insulating material between them. Classical physics says that current cannot flow through an insulator.
Because it's insulated. That's why wires are wrapped in rubber.
Exactly. But in quantum mechanics, we have a phenomenon called electron tunneling. Because the insulating barrier in a Josephson junction is so incredibly thin, pairs of superconducting electrons, they're called Cooper pairs, can literally tunnel through the barrier as if it wasn't even there.
Just ghost right through it.
Yes. And this creates something called a nonlinear inductance.
Nonlinear inductance. You're going to have to translate that into mechanical engineering made simple for me.
Fair enough. In a standard electrical circuit, like an electromagnet, the relationship between current and the magnetic field it creates is linear. If you double the current, you double the field.
Okay, that's straightforward.
The energy levels are evenly spaced like the rungs of a ladder. If you try to isolate just the bottom two rungs to act as your 0 and 1 for a qubit, it's very easy to accidentally push the system up to rung 3 or 4.
Because the step size is the same. The energy required to go from 1 to 2 is the exact same as going from 2 to 3.
Exactly. And you don't want a 3 or 4. You only want a 1 or a 0.
Right.
Nonlinear inductance warps the ladder. It makes the distance between rung 0 and rung 1 completely different from the distance between rung 1 and rung 2.
Oh, I see.
This isolates those first two energy levels perfectly, allowing the circuit to act as an incredibly stable qubit.
Okay, so the company has this incredibly complex physical architecture. We've got an inner disk, an outer ring, a quantum tunneling Josephson junction, and through substrate grounding pillars to stop crosstalk.
It's a marvel of engineering.
But how do they actually input data into this thing? They aren't just plugging a USB-C cable into a quantum ring, right?
No, they use microwave control signals. Specifically, the control signal line operates in the 4 to 12 gigahertz band.
Why microwaves?
The patent explicitly states that using microwave signals for control and observation, as opposed to traditional lower frequency radio waves, or RF, is crucial. Microwaves have much shorter wavelengths.
And short is good here.
Very good. Because the wavelength is shorter, it minimizes the surface current area where the ground electrode flows.
Mhm.
If you minimize the area the current travels, you suppress fluctuations in the electrode's potential. It keeps the whole system incredibly quiet.
Okay, here is where I am going to push back on the feasibility of this being the master brain of our shadowy global empire.
Let's hear it.
Because I'm reading the section on how they physically assemble this microwave control line. The patent talks about using a contact spring pin at the tip of the line and a pressing member that physically pushes the ground electrode against the circuit substrate. A spring pin, like the tiny spring that holds the AA battery in my TV remote. You're telling me the hyper-advanced quantum brain running the world is held together by physical springs pressing down on the chip.
I know, it sounds...
That sounds incredibly rudimentary. Is that scalable or just like a lab hack?
It sounds totally counterintuitive to the microscopic elegance of quantum tunneling, I agree. But you have to remember the totally hostile environment these chips operate in.
The cold.
Yes. Superconducting quantum computers don't just sit on a desk. They operate inside dilution refrigerators at temperatures of around 15 millikelvin.
Which is what exactly?
That is a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. It is literally colder than deep space.
Right. Well,
When you cool materials to that extreme, the laws of thermodynamics take over. Things shrink. Metals contract at different rates.
and I see where this is going.
If you were to solder that control line to the chip, the immense thermal contraction would rip the solder joint apart, or at the very least, introduce microscopic fractures and impurities that would completely destroy the superconductivity.
Ah. So the spring isn't a hack. It's a mechanical shock absorber for extreme cold.
Exactly. The use of a physical pressing member, combined with extension portions formed by a superconductor with higher extensibility than the ground pattern, is a brilliant mechanical solution to a profound thermal problem.
So as the entire assembly freezes and shrinks, the spring just expands to maintain consistent, perfect contact without the need for brittle solder.
Yes. So the spring is a feature, not a bug. And beyond just maintaining electrical contact, the skeptical analysis here requires looking at what that physical pressing achieves electromagnetically.
Wait, the physical pushing actually does something to the waves.
It does. By pressing the ground electrode down firmly, the circuit explicitly forces the space on the upper side of the quantum bit to be smaller.
Like squishing it.
Right, and the patent states this physically detunes the unnecessary electromagnetic mode. It alters the physical geometry of the space so that the resonant frequency of the gap doesn't match the 4 to 12 gigahertz control signals.
So it's acoustic dampening through literal mechanical pressure. Okay, I am thoroughly convinced it's highly feasible, but it's completely bounded by the physical constraints of absolute zero.
Completely. You cannot drop this master brain into a server rack in a warm office building. To run a global empire, this shadow company would require a massive, deeply subterranean, incredibly stable cryogenic infrastructure just to keep the brain from melting down.
Which perfectly transitions us to the next piece of the puzzle.
How so?
Because if our shadow company has built their massive, frozen, crosstalk-free quantum brain humming away at absolute zero, thinking thoughts we can't comprehend, they have a massive logistical problem.
Tower.
An empire doesn't just run on thoughts. It needs power. Massive, unfathomable amounts of power distributed everywhere, seamlessly. You can't run physical copper wires to every drone, sensor, and citizen in a global empire.
Because power lines can be cut.
Exactly, and grids can be hacked. So you need to untether the grid.
Untether it completely.
You beam the power wirelessly, everywhere, all at once. You create a literal invisible field of energy. And that brings us to our second document. Patent US 2023-344-271A1. Systems, methods, apparatuses, and devices for facilitating harnessing terahertz electromagnetic waves for energy generation.
That is a mouthful.
It is, but this patent specifically introduces something called the power coin.
Ah, yes, the power coin. It's detailed as a decentralized receiver device that facilitates the harnessing of these terahertz waves.
So how does it work?
To understand how this works, we have to break down the mechanics of the terahertz gap. This is the scientific foundation of the entire concept here.
The terahertz gap. Explain that to me.
On the electromagnetic spectrum, you have radio waves, then microwaves like what your Wi-Fi router or microwave oven uses. Further up the spectrum, you have infrared light, then visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays.
The usual suspects.
Right. The terahertz gap occupies a very specific frequency range between 0.3 and 3 terahertz. It sits perfectly wedged between microwaves and infrared light.
Why is it called a gap, though?
For decades, scientists called it a gap because it was notoriously difficult to generate and detect these specific waves efficiently. Electronic microwave components were too slow to generate them, and optical infrared lasers were too energetic.
So they are unlocking a historically hidden, unusable frequency of the spectrum to carry power. That's wild. How does the power coin actually catch an invisible wave and turn it into electricity to run a device?
It relies on a piece of hardware called a rectenna, or rectifying antenna. The power coin comprises a superconducting antenna precisely tuned to capture the wave energy of those specific terahertz frequencies.
Think of it like a highly specialized tuning fork that only vibrates when hit by terahertz waves.
That is a perfect analogy. Once the antenna captures the wave and begins to resonate, the alternating current energy is passed to a terahertz rectifier.
And what does the rectifier do?
The rectifier is electromagnetically coupled with the antenna, and its sole job is to take that oscillating, alternating terahertz signal and convert it into direct current, or DC, electrical energy.
And then that DC energy is transferred to power whatever it's plugged into. An IoT sensor, a mobile phone, or theoretically anything.
Exactly.
Okay, but I am looking at the materials they're using to build this rectifier and antenna inside the power coin. And this is where things start to sound less like standard electrical engineering and more like highly classified black projects.
Metamaterials.
Yes. They detail the use of quad-layer graphene, graphene aerogels, and borafene. What exactly are these materials and why are they necessary? Like, standard copper wire obviously isn't going to cut it here.
Definitely not. Terahertz frequencies oscillate trillions of times per second. Standard metals suffer from extreme resistance at those speeds due to something called the skin effect. So they turn to highly advanced metamaterials.
Tell me about quad-layer graphene.
Quad-layer graphene consists of 4 perfectly stacked, single-atom thick layers of carbon. This stacking arrangement alters the electronic band structure, providing massively increased conductivity and electron mobility compared to standard metals. They can move almost without friction.
And what about graphene aerogels?
Aerogels are 3-dimensional, highly porous structures. They remove the liquid component of a gel and replace it with gas. Graphene aerogels have extremely low density. They're actually lighter than air, but they boast an immense surface area.
Why do they need that inside a coin?
Because it makes them exceptional for rapid energy storage and extreme thermal management. When you are rectifying terahertz waves, you generate heat. The aerogel dissipates it instantly.
Oh, that makes sense. And borafene.
Borafene is a truly fascinating material. It is a 2-dimensional, single-atom thick monolayer of boron. It is stronger than graphene and has exceptional tunable electrical properties, making it an ideal superconductor component for the internal circuitry.
Okay, I follow the physics of the metamaterials, carbon, boron, atomic layers, sure. But here is where my conspiracy theorist brain is absolutely losing its mind.
Let's hear the theory.
Because we aren't just talking about lab-grown nanomaterials here. The patent literally specifies the enclosure materials for the terahertz system. It states that the inner surface of the receiver enclosure includes a pink granite block.
I knew that detail was going to catch your attention.
How could it not?
Yeah.
It explicitly notes that pink granite contains quartz and has radioactive properties, and they're using it to prevent electrical energy from escaping. And on the outside, white limestone tufa to prevent RF penetration.
It is unusual, I'll give you that.
Unusual, pink granite, white limestone. Are they building a next-generation quantum power grid, or are they literally rebuilding the Great Pyramid of Giza? Why is a shadow company using megalithic builder blocks from antiquity in a 21st century terahertz circuit? Is there an ancient tech angle here?
Look, it is arguably one of the most unusual choices of materials I have ever seen in an electronics patent. I grant you that.
Thank you.
However, if we force ourselves to analyze it strictly from a skeptical material science perspective, we have to look at the chemistry. The patent outlines specific preparation method. This terahertz composite material isn't just a raw chunk of rock carved out of a quarry. It's heavily processed.
Processed how?
The raw materials include silicon dioxide, which is quartz, highly abundant in pink granite, along with kaolin, calcium peroxide, ferric oxide, carbon nanotubes, graphene, and tourmaline.
So they are grinding down the pink granite and limestone and mixing the powder with carbon nanotubes?
Exactly. The preparation involves processing these materials into a powder or paste, mixing them in highly specific ratios, and often sintering them at extreme temperatures. They are engineering a synthetic composite.
To do what?
The goal is to create a material that possesses a specific high normal emissivity and a stable emission wavelength.
But why quartz and tourmaline specifically? What do those rocks actually do?
It comes down to their crystal lattice structures. Quartz has well-documented piezoelectric properties.
Piezoelectric.
Yes. If you apply mechanical stress to a quartz crystal, literally just squeeze it, the deformation of its crystal lattice pushes its internal electrons out of alignment, generating a measurable electric charge.
Just by squeezing it.
Right. And tourmaline, on the other hand, is pyroelectric. When it is heated or cooled, it generates a temporary voltage across the crystal.
Okay.
The patent claims that this specific powdered composite material, when subjected to thermal and mechanical pressures, creates a stable, continuous terahertz frequency wave without an external power source.
Wait, they're literally squeezing rocks to make invisible energy.
In the simplest possible terms, yes. Furthermore, to make sure the energy isn't just blasted randomly into space, the entire system relies on a hypersphere atomic clock.
A hypersphere atomic clock.
Yes, this clock ensures hyper-precise synchronization between the transmitter's frequency and the receiver's tuning, ensuring the waves are perfectly aligned for resonant energy transfer.
Here is where it gets incredibly dystopian, though. We are talking about limitless, continuous power beaming through the air. You would think the overarching goal of this company would be post-scarcity, free electricity for everyone.
You would think.
But no. The patent explicitly details that this harvested terahertz energy is quantified and stored as a quantum fractional non-fungible token, or FNFT, on a decentralized blockchain network.
Yes, the ledger.
Why does a limitless power source require a blockchain ledger? Is this the ultimate control mechanism? The company provides the invisible power your devices need to survive, but every single milliwatt is metered, tokenized, and monetized on an unhackable, immutable ledger.
It speaks entirely to command and control. The integration of a blockchain ledger, specifically what the patent calls a quantum energy asset storage digital wallet, suggests a system designed for massive decentralized distribution and strict accounting.
So they can cut you off.
Exactly. If you have millions of power coins embedded in citizens' devices receiving terahertz energy, a blockchain provides a secure cryptographic protocol. They call it a quantum power key distribution method.
And that does what?
It ensures that only authorized, paying, or compliant devices receive the power, and that the energy transfer is authenticated in real time. It completely prevents power theft from the ambient grid.
If you aren't authenticated on the ledger, your power coin is blind to the terahertz waves, and your devices just die.
Absolute control of the grid.
But speaking of the grid, where's the massive power actually coming from before it hits the power coin? I mean, they aren't just squeezing a big block of granite somewhere.
No, the patent talks about harvesting energy from the ionosphere and the magnetosphere using low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellites.
Base power.
This is where we reach the absolute boundaries of current theoretical physics and engineering feasibility. The patent mentions producing thermal electromagnetic energy through blackbody radiation, specifically citing Planck's law.
Unpack Planck's law for me.
Planck's law describes the electromagnetic radiation emitted by a black body in thermal equilibrium at a given temperature. Essentially, any object in the universe at a temperature above absolute zero emits some form of electromagnetic radiation.
Okay, I'm with you.
For example, you emit infrared radiation right now, which is why a thermal camera can see you in the dark.
Makes sense.
The patent proposes that LEO satellites could harvest the massive ambient thermal energy of the Earth's magnetosphere and ionosphere, use the graphene granite metamaterials to convert that chaotic thermal energy into uniform terahertz waves, and beam it down to Earth.
It sounds perfect in theory.
In theory, yes. Capturing terahertz waves via rectennas is grounded in proven lab science. Harvesting ambient blackbody radiation is physically possible. But the jump to providing limitless, continuous, massive-scale power pushes into highly speculative territory. The energy density of the ionosphere is vast, but you face the inverse square law of attenuation.
Meaning the signal gets weaker the further it travels.
Exponentially weaker. Beaming terahertz waves down through miles of atmospheric water vapor, which heavily absorbs terahertz frequencies without massive loss of signal, and then receiving enough of it via a tiny power coin to run a laptop.
It's a stretch.
The feasibility of doing that continuously and at scale is, at best, unproven. The physical losses in conversion and transmission would be staggering.
But if they could pull it off, they have a limitless grid. They have the frozen quantum brain deep underground,
Right.
and they have LEO satellites harvesting the magnetosphere, beaming invisible power down, tokenizing it via blockchain.
It's quite the setup.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring logistical problem.
Oh.
How does this company launch and maintain a sprawling constellation of terahertz power satellites
Wow.
without the world noticing a massive, continuous supply chain of highly explosive rocket fuel?
Oh.
You can't secretly launch 1,000 SpaceX rockets. The exhaust plumes are visible for hundreds of miles. People would notice.
You need a silent, fuel-free method of getting mass into orbit.
Exactly. And that brings us to patent US 111497119B2, the EdDrive propellantless propulsion system.
This stealth deployment.
I love this patent because it actively claims to break the most fundamental rule I learned in high school physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Newton's third law.
Right.
Yeah.
If you want to move forward in the vacuum of space, you have to throw something massive backward out the tailpipe. That's how rockets work. But the EdDrive claims to require zero propellant. It uses electricity, sure, but no chemical fuel.
Correct.
And crucially, it vehemently claims it does not violate Newton's laws of motion. How is that possible? Most propulsion experts consider mechanical propellantless propulsion to be mathematically impossible due to the law of conservation of momentum.
They absolutely do. The law of conservation of momentum is foundational. It states that in a closed, isolated system, the total momentum remains constant. You cannot pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Right, the classic analogy. If I sit in a wheeled office chair in the middle of a room and I violently throw a heavy bowling ball forward, the chair rolls backward. But if that bowling ball is attached to a bungee cord tied to my waist, the ball reaches the end of the cord, snaps back, and hits me in the chest. My forward momentum from catching the ball exactly cancels out my backward momentum from throwing it.
Exactly.
The net movement of the office chair is zero. I just violently wiggle in place.
That is the exact mathematical hurdle the EdDrive claims to overcome.
So how does the EdDrive cheat the bungee cord?
Well, it doesn't claim to cheat. It claims to meticulously manage the kinetic energy transfers across two distinct phases to manipulate the action-reaction pairs.
How so?
The patent describes a core mechanism called a regular unit, which operates in phase 1 and phase 2. The primary goal of phase 1 is to generate massive internal force without causing any unwanted movement of the host vehicle.
Okay, generation without movement. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
The unit consists of a containment vessel, which acts as the second, larger mass, coupled to forward, middle, and aft bulkheads. Inside this sealed vessel is the first mass, referred to as the large mass projectile, or LMP.
So imagine a massive block of dense steel on a rail system.
Basically, an electric motor winch, bolted to the rear of the vessel, pulls the LMP toward the forward bulkhead.
Wait, pulling it forward.
Yes, but crucially, the LMP is pulled against a thick elastic strap made of advanced rubber or a highly elastic polymer anchored to the rear. The winch slowly stretches this elastic strap, building up a massive amount of potential energy.
Okay, so they're pulling it taut.
Right. The patent claims that this pulling action is done at a highly calculated velocity where the friction and the action-reaction forces perfectly cancel each other out, resulting in no net movement of the containment vessel in the vacuum of space.
And then they let go.
Yes, they release the winch clutch. The restoring force of the stretched elastic strap violently propels the large mass projectile backward away from the forward bulkhead.
Okay.
And because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, the force of the elastic strap propelling the massive steel block backward also propels the containment vessel, the spacecraft itself, forward. This is the beginning of phase 2, the thrust phase.
But hold on. The LMP is flying backward inside a closed metal box. It has to hit the back wall of the box eventually, right? And when it hits the back wall, the forward momentum of the box is completely canceled out by the impact.
The bungee cord hits you in the chest.
Exactly. The office chair stops. So how do they get around that?
This is where the patent introduces its primary solution, the concept of a partially inelastic collision. The LMP doesn't just slam into a solid titanium wall. It strikes a specially engineered elastic impactor mounted on a middle bulkhead.
Okay, let's define the physics of collisions for a second.
Certainly, in a perfectly elastic collision, like two hard billiard balls hitting kinetic energy is entirely conserved. They bounce off each other perfectly.
Right.
In a completely inelastic collision, like throwing a ball of wet clay against a brick wall, the objects stick together and maximum kinetic energy is lost, usually converted entirely into heat and sound. A partially inelastic collision is somewhere in the middle. The LMP strikes the specialized rubber impactor, transfers some of its momentum to push the host vehicle forward, and rebounds, but with significantly less kinetic energy than it started with.
Because the energy was absorbed by the deformation of the rubber.
Exactly. The patent outlines multiple embodiments for managing this recoil. For instance, the sixth embodiment uses two large-diameter, equal-length coil springs instead of rubber strap to drive the mass.
So they use springs instead.
Right. And the ninth embodiment goes completely radical and removes the rebounding rear impact entirely. It uses two smaller masses that are propelled, and somehow their action-reaction is electromagnetically managed without ever striking a rear bulkhead.
Let me stop you right there.
Mm-hmm.
I am picturing this mechanical reality. You have a sealed box in microgravity. Inside, an electric winch pulls a massive steel block forward against a giant rubber band, then releases it.
Yes.
The steel block slams backward into a rubber wall, deforms it, bounces back forward, and the winch catches it to do it all again.
That's the mechanism.
Doesn't a closed system violently throwing a steel block back and forth millions of times just violently shake the satellite apart rather than smoothly move it forward? How does this not just turn the stealth spacecraft into a giant catastrophic maraca?
A maraca! I like that.
I mean, the vibrational shear stress would rip the bulkheads to shreds.
What's fascinating here is how the patent addresses that exact structural nightmare. You are absolutely right. The sheer stress of repeated inelastic collisions on a spacecraft's bulkheads would be catastrophic under normal engineering circumstances. The joints would fatigue and shatter.
So what's their fix?
The patent solution to this relies heavily on artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Well, of course it does. The quantum brain from the underground bunker is running the spaceship.
Precisely. The 11th embodiment of the patent explicitly details using multiple AI-enhanced control systems to simultaneously manage multiple EdDrive units at once.
So it's not just one big block.
No, you wouldn't just have one of these on a spacecraft. You would have 5, 10, or 50 of these units arrayed across the hull. The AI mathematically calculates the structural resonance of the spacecraft. It perfects the microsecond timing of the release and cancellation of the action-reaction pairs across all 50 units.
So it orchestrates a literal symphony of steel blocks.
Exactly. It uses destructive interference. It calculates that if unit number 1 impacts the rear bulkhead and sends a vibrational acoustic wave through the hull, it will fire unit number 3 at the exact millisecond necessary so that unit 3's impact wave meets unit 1's wave perfectly out of phase, canceling the vibration entirely.
Whoa.
While one block is impacting, another is being pulled, another is resetting. The AI ensures that the net force vector is always pointing smoothly forward and that the vibrational stress is entirely counteracted.
That is insane.
Furthermore, they use a regenerative braking system on linear actuators attached to the elastic straps. As the mass is caught and stopped, the actuators harvest the remaining kinetic energy and store it in supercapacitors to power the winch for the next pull.
So if the Shadow Company has the quantum computing power to calculate the microsecond level acoustic timing of 50 giant steel blocks bouncing on rubber walls, they could theoretically create a smooth, continuous thrust vector without a single drop of chemical rocket fuel.
Theoretically. But the skeptical analysis must emphasize the extreme delta between theory and applied material science here.
Why?
While the individual mechanical components, winches, coil springs, elastomers, linear actuators, supercapacitors are all standard, proven engineering, combining them to consistently violate the macroscopic observation of the conservation of momentum remains highly controversial in physics.
Because it breaks the rules.
Right. But more importantly, the structural engineering required to build a lightweight spacecraft bulkhead that can survive millions of partially inelastic collisions with a heavy steel block in the harsh temperature extremes of the vacuum of space. It's a monumental, perhaps insurmountable material science challenge. Metal fatigue in space is merciless.
But if they do surmount it, they have their stealth deployment. They can silently, slowly push their terahertz power grid into the magnetosphere, powered wirelessly, orchestrated by a frozen quantum brain.
The infrastructure would be in place.
Exactly. The environment is perfectly set. But a perfectly engineered environment is utterly useless if the biological organisms inside it us can't interface with it.
Humans.
Right. The baseline human body wasn't built to withstand ambient terahertz fields or process data at quantum speeds. There is one variable left in the empire, and it's the subjects. We need a hardware upgrade, a patch.
Which brings us to the next phase of the architecture. We are looking at two distinct patents here that address human-biological interfacing.
Let's hear them.
First, US 8697359B1, which covers CRISPR-Cas systems for altering the expression of gene products. And second, US1177478 covering high-performance selective light wavelength filtering.
Let's start with the biological source code. Tell me about this CRISPR patent.
The CRISPR-Cas9 system is arguably the most significant world-altering biological discovery of the 21st century. It essentially acts as highly programmable molecular scissors, allowing for precise editing of the DNA sequence inside a living cell.
But how does the system actually know where to cut? Human DNA has 3 billion base pairs. If I want to change one specific trait, how does the scissor find the exact right spot without just blindly shredding my genome?
It is an incredibly elegant biological search engine. It uses two main components. First, the Cas9 protein itself. This protein usually originates from bacteria, specifically Streptococcus pyogenes or Streptococcus thermophilus.
Okay, bacteria.
In bacteria, this is actually an ancient immune system used to chop up invading viral DNA. This is the cutting enzyme, the physical scissor. Second, it uses a synthetic guide RNA, or sgRNA. This guide RNA is synthesized in a lab and programmed with a highly specific 20-nucleotide guide sequence.
So you type in a 20-letter biological search query into the guide RNA, and the Cas9 protein acts like the cursor, traveling along the DNA helix until it finds that exact 20-letter match.
Precisely. The guide sequence is physically fused to something called a trackmate sequence, which acts as a biological scaffold, holding the Cas9 protein tight.
Okay.
But the system has a crucial built-in security check, so it doesn't just cut randomly. The Cas9 protein won't cleave the DNA just because the guide RNA binds to it. It requires a password.
A biological password.
Yes. This is called a PAM sequence, a protospacer adjacent motif. For Cas9, this is typically the sequence NG, which stands for asparagine, guanine, guanine. The sequence must be located directly upstream of the target DNA.
So the guide RNA finds the 20-letter match, and the Cas9 checks to see if the NG password is next to it.
Exactly. If the guide matches perfectly and the PAM password is present, the Cas9 protein changes its three-dimensional shape, unzips the DNA double helix, and cleaves it.
Cleaves it, meaning it violently snaps both strands of the DNA double helix in half.
Yes, it does.
But that sounds incredibly damaging. If the shadow company is just trying to gently upgrade a human to work in space or survive terahertz fields, doesn't snapping their DNA cause massive cellular damage?
It can. A double-strand break is a catastrophic event for a cell. It triggers the cell's emergency repair mechanism, a process called non-homologous end joining.
That sounds complicated.
Because both strands are broken, the cell basically panics and just tries to jam the broken ends back together as fast as possible. This process is highly error-prone and often inserts or deletes random bases at the cut site, which effectively disables or breaks the gene entirely.
Yikes.
That's great if you want to turn off a disease gene, but terrible if you want to cleanly insert a new upgrade. But the patent highlights a brilliant, highly specific molecular modification, the D10A mutation.
What exactly does D10A do mechanically?
D10A refers to mutating a single amino acid, the Cas9 protein structure, changing an aspartate at position 10 to an alanine. This specific change occurs in the RuVCI catalytic domain of the protein.
Untack catalytic domain for me.
A catalytic domain is the physical active site on an enzyme where the chemical reaction actually occurs. It's the sharp edge of the scissor blade.
Oh, gotcha.
By mutating that single amino acid, you change the chemical charge and the 3D geometry of that blade. This changes the Cas9 from a nuclease, which cuts both strands of the DNA, into a nickase.
A nickase.
Yes. A nickase only cleaves a single strand of the DNA backbone, leaving the other strand entirely intact.
So instead of chopping the rope in half, it just carefully frays one side of it.
Yes, exactly. And a single-strand nick is vastly safer. It doesn't trigger that panic-induced non-homologous end joining. Instead, it triggers a much more graceful repair pathway called homologous recombination.
How does that help with an upgrade?
If you simultaneously provide the cell with an exogenous template, a customized piece of DNA you synthesized in the lab with the exact amino acid changes you want, the cell will naturally use that template as a blueprint to smoothly repair the nick.
Wow.
It perfectly integrates your new genetic code into the genome without massive DNA damage.
Think about what this means for you, the listener. If I look at this through my conspiracy lens, it's literally a biological software patch. You use the CRISPR nickase to gently modify the biological source code of your human subjects.
Right.
You provide a template that alters their muscle density for low-gravity work on the EdDrive space stations, or you tweak their cellular radiation resistance to withstand the ambient terahertz power grid we built in segment 2.
From a purely molecular theoretical standpoint, the tools described in this patent absolutely make those precise edits possible in human cells.
Well,
But the skeptical feasibility check is crucial here. The patent clearly specifies that for this vector system to work inside eukaryotic cells, the Cas9 enzyme must be engineered with a nuclear localization signal, or NLS.
what is an NLS?
It is basically a biological VIP pass. Eukaryotic cells store their DNA inside a heavily protected nucleus. Proteins can't just wander in.
Oh, security.
The NLS is a specific amino acid sequence attached to the Cas9 that tricks the nuclear pores into letting it inside. But the real hurdle is delivery. Using the system to edit a single embryo in a petri dish is one thing.
What, doing it to an adult?
Right. Efficiently delivering this complex vector system, the Cas9, the guide RNA, the NLS, and the exogenous repair template to trillions of target cells in a living, breathing adult human to enact a systemic biological upgrade is vastly more complex. The immune system will likely attack the bacterial Cas9 protein before it ever reaches the cells.
Okay, so the biological patch is difficult to deploy over the air.
Go ahead.
But if you can't seamlessly edit the biology, you augment it with physical hardware. You build a user interface for the subjects.
And that brings us to the optical lenses.
Yes, patent US 117747883B2. This focuses on specialized ophthalmic lenses designed to provide selective light wavelength filtering to drastically improve contrast sensitivity and visual acuity.
Exactly.
So we slap a specialized visual filter over the subject's eyes. What exactly are these lenses doing mechanically? Are they just fancy polarized sunglasses?
They are exponentially more sophisticated than standard sunglasses or polarized lenses. The patent details manufacturing multifocal lenses, wafers, or optical preforms that incorporate highly specific color balancing dyes directly into the polymer mold during casting.
So it's baked in, rather than just painting a tint on the surface after the fact.
Exactly. They combine this complex in-mold dyeing with precise blue-blocking tints. The mechanical goal is to filter out very specific wavelengths of light that naturally cause scatter and chromatic aberration in the human eye, particularly high-energy blue light.
Chromatic aberration, that's when colors bleed or blur at the edges of objects. Right?
Exactly. Different wavelengths of light bend at slightly different angles when they enter the lens of your eye. Blue light scatters them most easily, causing a microscopic blur or haze over everything you see.
And by precisely filtering it out, you artificially enhance contrast.
But they go much further. The patent describes applying multiple thin-film anti-reflective, or AR, components to both the convex front surface and the concave back surface of the lenses.
How does an anti-reflective coating actually work? Is it just a matte finish?
It uses the physics of constructive and destructive interference. The AR coating consists of alternating microscopic layers of materials with high and low indices of refraction.
Okay.
When light hits the lens, some reflects off the top of the AR layer and some reflects off the bottom of the AR layer. By engineering the exact thickness of these layers, the two reflected light waves emerge exactly out of phase with each other.
The peaks of one wave line up with the troughs of the other.
Exactly, and they mathematically cancel each other out. The reflection is destroyed, allowing almost 100% of the light to pass directly into your eye.
And the patent talks about using CIE coordinates to balance the color, right?
Yes, the International Commission on Illumination coordinates, because if you block blue light, everything you see turns aggressively yellow or orange.
Right, like those cheap blue blocker glasses.
Exactly. The patent uses exact CIE mathematical coordinates to precisely quantify and add neutralizing color dyes to the lens mold. This ensures the wearer perceives perfect, natural color balance, while the harmful or scattering wavelengths are entirely blocked from reaching the retina.
So if the company's new world is filled with invisible terahertz transmitters, low Earth orbit energy beams, and quantum screens emitting high-energy light, these lenses are the required UI.
They could act as one, yes.
They optimize human contrast sensitivity so the subjects can see this new digital world perfectly without being blinded or suffering neurological fatigue from the infrastructure. So tell me, skeptic, can precise CRISPR gene editing actually be combined with advanced physical wearables to create forced sci-fi upgrades for humanity?
I have to ground this discussion in reality. The optical pattern is highly feasible. In fact, the chemistry, interference physics, and manufacturing processes described represent the absolute cutting edge of modern optometry. We already use AR coatings and blue blockers daily. And CRISPR, as we discussed, is a revolutionary tool currently being used to modify and cure genetic diseases. but combining them as a coordinated forced human evolution program remains squarely in the realm of your conspiracy theory.
You're raining on my parade here.
The foundational tools exist, yes. We can edit genes precisely, and we can manipulate the physics of light entering the human eye perfectly. But deploying them together as a mandatory societal upgrade requires a leap of implementation and malicious intent that simply isn't supported by the texts.
Fair enough. The skeptic keeps me honest. But let's look at the final piece of the puzzle.
The last patent.
Because every empire has a fatal flaw. The infrastructure is in space, the limitless power is wireless, the quantum brain is humming at absolute zero, and the humans have their biological patches and optical upgrades.
Okay.
But if you have billions of upgraded, highly intelligent humans living in a perfectly engineered, metered society, how do you keep them compliant? How do you keep them productive? And most importantly, in a world moving at quantum speeds, how do you keep them sane?
That brings us to our final patent document, US 20250174337A1, the AI-based personalized predictive treatment system.
The panopticon, the ultimate medical surveillance state.
The patent frames it much more benevolently. It describes a system designed to provide hyper-personalized treatment plans to individuals suffering from mental health disorders.
So it's better therapy.
It aims to entirely replace the current one-size-fits-all approach to psychiatry, where doctors sort of guess which antidepressant might work with a highly tailored, objective, dynamic AI model.
And how exactly does this artificial intelligence know what I'm feeling better than I do?
It starts with continuous, objective biometric data gathering. The primary input is electroencephalogram, or EEG, measurements.
Brainwaves.
Yes. The system acquires this data via wearable devices, perhaps integrated into the optical frames we just discussed, that continuously record the electrical activity of your brain.
How often is it recording?
The data is sampled at a very high rate, 256 hertz or higher. That means the system is taking 256 distinct electrical snapshots of your brain's state every single second of your life.
That is an absolute fire hose of data. But brainwaves are incredibly messy, right?
Extremely.
If I blink or clench my jaw or even just move my eyes, doesn't the electrical noise from my muscles completely drown out the tiny electrical signals from my brain?
It absolutely does, which
Yeah.
is why the digital signal processing described in the patent is so vital. The system first applies a 0.5 to 50 hertz bandpass filter.
What does that do?
This mathematically chops off any electrical signals outside that frequency range, isolating only the specific frequencies of human brainwaves, the delta, theta, alpha, and beta waves.
But that doesn't solve the blinking issue. My blink is still in that data somewhere.
Right. To fix that, it uses a complex algorithm called independent component analysis, or IAA.
How does IAA separate a blink from a thought?
Think of it as the cocktail party problem. If you have two microphones in a room and two people talking simultaneously, both microphones record a messy blend of both voices.
Like crosstalk from earlier.
Exactly. ICA is a computational method that mathematically separates a multivariate signal into additive subcomponents. It looks at the statistical independence of the electrical sources.
Okay.
Because the electrical signature of an eye muscle contracting is statistically independent from the electrical signature of your frontal lobe processing an emotion, ICA can isolate the muscle artifact and mathematically scrub it from the data stream, leaving only the pure, unadulterated brainwave signal.
Okay, so the AI has my pure, scrubbed, mathematically perfect brainwaves 256 times a second. Is that all it uses to diagnose me?
No, the EEG is just the foundation. It combines that real-time brainwave data with an exhaustive, high-dimensional list of patient-specific factors. The database tracks your exact age, your cultural background, your entire medical history, and the historical severity of your symptoms.
Wow, so everything.
It also ingests results from standardized cognitive function tests, like the MoCA Montreal Cognitive Assessment or the MMSE, the Mini Mental State Examination, which measure memory, attention, and language.
And does it ask me how I'm doing?
It does. It pulls in your subjective self-evaluations from standardized psychiatric questionnaires, like the PHQ-9 for depression severity and the G87 for anxiety.
So it knows the exact electrical frequency of my brain, my memory test scores, my cultural background, and exactly how depressed I told the app I am. What kind of computational math does the AI use to process all of that?
It creates a high-dimensional mathematical vector representing you. Then, it uses sophisticated similarity matching algorithms, specifically mentioning techniques like cosine similarity or Euclidean distance.
Cosine similarity.
It takes your massive multidimensional profile and compares it in real time against a historical database of thousands, maybe millions of other patients. By calculating the cosine of the angle between your data vector and every other patient's vector in the database, it instantly finds the exact patients whose brains, cultures, and lives look mathematically identical to yours.
And then it went.
It looks at what specific treatments worked best for them and predicts the optimal treatment for you.
What kind of treatments are we talking about here? Is the AI just dispensing a digital prescription for a pill?
It ranges widely across modalities. It could certainly suggest specific medication categories based on historical success: antipsychotics, stimulants, anti-anxiety drugs. It recommends specific psychotherapy approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavior therapy.
Standard stuff.
But it also heavily includes alternative direct brain hardware therapies.
Like what?
Things like RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, which uses powerful electromagnets to physically stimulate specific underactive areas of the brain, or VNS, vagus nerve stimulation, which acts like a pacemaker, sending mild, regular pulses of electrical energy directly to the brainstem via the vagus nerve in your neck.
Okay, I genuinely see the profound medical promise here. An objective, data-driven end to the trial-and-error nightmare of psychiatric medication.
It is very promising.
But here is the massive dystopian red flag in this patent. I'm looking at the sections labeled the notification module and the daily life monitoring module. It says it tracks daily life factors: your sleep quality, your physical activity, your social interactions, and your substance use. And it continuously monitors your wearable EEG.
Yes.
If the AI detects a subtle change in your alpha-beta asymmetry, or predicts worsening symptoms or suicidal ideation based on your brain waves, it autonomously transmits alerts to medical professionals or authorities.
That is the surveillance aspect.
Is this the ultimate utopian healthcare where no one ever falls through the cracks?
Okay.
Or is this a dystopian thought police system where an artificial intelligence knows you're severely depressed, or perhaps thinking rebellious thoughts before you even consciously realize it yourself?
When we pull back and look at the broader implications, you are highlighting the absolute core tension of modern neurotechnology. You have the incredible medical promise of objective, EEG-driven mental health care weighed against the severe reality of total data privacy loss and the erosion of cognitive liberty.
Because it sees everything.
From a strictly mechanical standpoint, the most fascinating and perhaps terrifying part of the patent is the treatment plan adjustment module. The AI learns.
Yes, it is a closed-loop machine learning system. It calibrates in real time.
Meaning what?
If it suggests a treatment, say, a specific frequency of vagus nerve stimulation and your real-time EEG doesn't shift into the targeted healthy pattern, the AI learns from that failure immediately. It dynamically alters the voltage or switches to a new protocol, tightening its control over your mental state until it achieves the desired electrical baseline.
Oh my God.
It is a medical marvel of continuous psychological adjustment, but as a mandatory society-wide infrastructure, it would indeed function as the ultimate panopticon.
Wow. Okay, I am going to drop the conspiracy persona for just a second here. Because when you step back and truly look at what we've covered today, the sheer scale of human ingenuity contained in these 6 documents is staggering.
It really is.
We went from engineering contact springs to survive absolute zero just to quiet the quantum noise of electron tunneling. We talked about bouncing heavy steel blocks against rubber bulkheads in microgravity, using neural networks to mathematically cheat the structural destruction of the conservation of momentum. And that was just the infrastructure.
Right. We talked about grinding up pink granite to harvest invisible black body radiation from the magnetosphere, mutating the catalytic domain of bacterial scissors to edit the very source code of human DNA without breaking it, filtering the physics of light that hits our retinas, and using high-dimensional vector math to scrub our brainwaves and predict our sanity.
It is a profound testament to the depth and breadth of applied human science. None of these patents exist in a vacuum. Every single one represents hundreds of thousands of hours of research, trial, error, material failure, and mathematical modeling by brilliant minds.
And to you, the listener, whether these technologies are being secretly assembled by one shadowy, omnipotent company, or whether they're being developed independently by 1,000 different labs, universities, and startups across the globe, this is the mechanical hardware of your immediate future.
Without a doubt.
You will likely wear lenses that use these exact anti-reflective interference coatings. You or someone you love will almost certainly be treated by a clinical AI analyzing cognitive biometric data. Your devices might one day be powered by ambient energy networks operating in frequencies we currently ignore.
The mechanics of tomorrow are being legally patented and documented today. And understanding how they work, the physical thermodynamics, the molecular biology, the algorithmic vector math, is the only way to navigate that arriving future thoughtfully.
I couldn't agree more.
But I do want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought. Something that wasn't explicitly spelled out in any single document we analyze today, but lives quietly in the theoretical spaces between them.
Let's hear it.
We talked about these patents as separate tools. But what happens when the hyper-intelligent AI that is continuously analyzing your scrubbed EEG brainwaves is running directly on that frozen, superconducting, crosstalk-free quantum circuit? And what happens when that unfathomably fast system decides that the most efficient, permanent treatment for your detected mental health discrepancy isn't a talk therapy session or magnetic pulse, but a highly specific CRISPR-Cas9 gene edit delivered instantly and wirelessly via a terahertz energy signal straight into your nervous system?
Whoa.
When the system can edit the observer, where does the tool end and where do you begin?
Interference fit, baby. Snug as fuck. We are mechanical engineering made simple. See you next time.